Another change of location. Slightly. So, as stated, I know that even if humanity is past a point of no return, to some degree or another, sociologically, collectivism still persists. Still persists. And the proof for that, not just with the very fact that I'm here, not only that, is my very existence disproves misanthropy and doomerism. I know that as well because we're still here. Despite all the major atrocities in the world, pick any people group, any one, they're still here. We're still here in some form or another. It's the fear of, because of mass degradation, alienation, and mass murder that will go extinct. And that's why we need to keep fighting in terms of bloody, violent revolution or peaceful protest with picket signs or 4-day walkouts that end within 4 days. The reality is that's not true. Yeah, that does not condone the atrocities committed to your group of people. It's morally deplorable. It's horrible. It's inhumane. But even for cultural practices, non-problematic and problematic, that have been pushed farther out of the mainstream, and have been soiled beyond belief. The fact that people still remember them and still try to practice them shows that they're still around. They're still alive, at the very least in memory. We're still here. We're still fighting against right-wing dogmas. We're still kicking in some form or another, despite us being kicked 24/7. Now let me say, you cannot kick your oppressor back in terms of physical harm and dehumanization and expect results. You can't. Despite what so many people want to believe, you cannot fight fire with fire. Here, let me actually put that into a physical metaphor. Can you actually fight real fire with real fire? Can you? Can you put out a forest fire with a flamethrower? No, you can't. How do you put it out? With cold, cool water. Or cool fire extinguisher solution. Or a fire blanket to wrap it in or pat it in to suffocate out the flames. That's how you put out actual fire. And as far as I'm concerned, that's how you put out metaphysical fire. Yeah, I'm showing my diagrams again. I will show them as many times as necessary. I don't care if it becomes, well, I don't abide it that it becomes redundant. It's not redundant. Just clearly people don't get it. They don't get it. You can't fight morally corrupt sociopathy with more sociopathy. Lack of empathy. All that does is reaffirm to your oppressor that you are a dangerous threat that needs to be quelled. At all costs. That's all it does. I've seen idiots online who think if the world is cruel to you, be cruel back. It's a defense mechanism. It's necessary. No, it's not. You're just the same. You're morally just the same. And you continue the repetitive cycle of trauma. You're going to traumatize your future children. You will. Don't think for a second you won't. Oh, but I'm sorry, there are those who are also anti-natalist, which is completely absurd. Natalism is not a crime against humanity. Birth is not a crime against humanity. People who think that biological parents are murderers because of their selfish actions to have a child, well, by that logic, every life choice you made is an atrocity. It is not a terrible thing to have children. People will claim, well, because of the way the world is now. We make the world the way it is now. We do. We all have choices. And I'm so tired of hearing amongst leftist intellectuals as well, in terms of leftist discourse, I'm so tired of hearing people on the left putting the blame on the larger societal institutions at bay. Well, who are the larger societal institutions? Yes, the economic system is corrupt. The governmental system is corrupt. The educational system is corrupt. All of it is corrupt. Yes, the socio-cultural system that is prevalent throughout the world, mass hedonism, it's corrupt. Well, guess who makes up those institutions? People. Who do you think? So, no, I do blame every individual person in a society all over the world. And I blame myself, as I've said before. You know why? Because here's another reality. We cannot stop being unnecessary, unethical hypocrites until other people actively try and stop being hypocrites as well. They have so much control. Elites of the world have so much control, so much further say, or in whatever context of a more normative stance, heteronormativity against those of other sexualities, cisnormativity against other genders, gender expressions, white supremacy, Christian supremacy, or in the Islamic world, Islamic supremacy. It has so much influence that when someone actively tries to go against the system as much as they can, you pretty much, if other people in your community setting are not actively going to try and stop abiding by a provably morally disgusting ideology themselves, and you're the only person who does it, you're inevitably going to be backed into a corner of no other options. You have a choice. It's not that you have no choice. You have a choice of what to do. That's something that the left needs to realize as well. But you have no other option to obtain if you're trying to keep your life force sustained to some degree, and other people's. You practically have no other option. Well, it's not practical, because as far as I'm concerned, anything that's practical to human knowledge to human interaction is morally correct. My theory and philosophy of intrinsic moral practicality. You can't separate morality from practicality. You can't. Not to human conceptualization. You're backed into a corner where you basically have nowhere else to go and you have to pick something. And in whatever you pick, if you're trying to remain morally competent, die trying. Still doesn't make it a good option. Even that word I often have issue with, good. People need to get their heads out of their asses as well. The fact that there is no such thing as good and evil. Even though I use the terms good and bad for certain things, in actuality, there is no such thing as good or bad. The way I look at humanity is that there are more beneficial people and there are more detrimental people. And then there's everyone in between, and that's it. One minute someone could be doing something provably morally competent, and then the next minute they do something abhorrent, in essence. That's why... Where are you? This. It would focus, for God's sake. That's why I decided to diversify the political spectrum. It's not a straight horizontal line. In essence, at certain points, the far left, the far right, extremist center, they become the same, in essence, in terms of what they morally condone. But they're not concretely the same because they have a certain amount of different methodologies and because they have different ideological end goals. The left wants freedom and liberty. The right thinks they want freedom and liberty, but in actuality, well, they want the liberty to oppress. And the centrists try and play favorites with either side. Because they want everyone to get along. Understandable. But not a actual not an actual effective means of making that happen. So all of this, I've accepted that people will not most likely know my work for a long time, despite the fact of how beneficial it could be. That collective prosperity still persists to some degree or another. And that there is, in that regard, hope for humanity, optimism. Still an optimistic nihilist. And that I will die trying to abide by the life of anarcho-maximalism. And that is the point to keep going. But the final question, I guess, remains, well, how does one really enact any of this? Going against systematic and systemic forces as much as you can. I've said it before, and I hold true to it. You start by not using them. In terms of economy, stop buying from mega corporations and moderate corporations. Stop going to McDonald's every lunch break at work. Stop going to Tim Hortons. Stop buying from Walmart or Costco. Any of them. Stop banking at BMO if you have the ability to. Or at Scotiabank. Or at TD. If I find another alternative for banking with my banks right now, I'm going to switch. Stop purchasing their items as much as possible. This includes manufacturers as well. Steel manufacturers, wood manufacturers, car manufacturers in that regard, etc. In terms of the governmental systems, stop abiding by oppressive laws. I don't mean be a purposeful contrarian. Don't just be purposely contrary to a law just because it's a law. But don't operate with the law. If what you do just so happens to fall within the legal category, fine, no issue. But if it does provably beneficial, do it. Do the illegal action. In that regard, commit a crime. You would be committing a crime by going against the legal system. Do it. Don't just do it for the hell of it. But if ultimately you have to, do it. Don't abide by the law. It is inherently an oppressive force. Set for control. Same with capitalism. Private policy enforcement of a singular or few executive officials. Stop participating in cultural traditions, whether you are of a predominantly suppressed group or not, that are provably problematic, that provably, in their essence, are detrimental. That doesn't mean the entirety of your culture is detrimental at all, but there are a multitude of examples of clearly non-beneficial traditions that hinder various individuals within a collective group. It does not matter whether your culture has been suppressed under another oppressive ideologic cultural practice for however long. And it does not matter if your culture has not been suppressed predominantly and you have had the liberty to engage with said problematic traditions for a plethora of time with relative ease for the most part in terms of legal enforcement. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make the tradition morally right. It doesn't. Whether you're an oppressor or the oppressed. It doesn't. Stop participating in it. And actually analyze what is inherently part of this culture that is beneficial, what is inherently detrimental, or what are elements that are more gray areas. Really, the most I can say is go against it. Become a homeless nomad. For Christ's sakes, it's what I've been screaming. Leave your situated houses on private land that you pay a mortgage for or that you pay rent towards. Buy a vehicle if you have enough money to, saved up. Live in it. Buy some equipment, space heaters, a lot of blankets, thermally heated sleeping bags, whatever else. Reuse them and go from there. If you don't have the ability for a vehicle, well, then do what I've done and figure it out with just merely a tent and thermally heated sleeping gear. Do that. Go off to wherever you feel you need to go. You don't have to do what I've done to be a nomad. You don't have to go traveling an extensive length, domestically within a country or internationally. You can stay in your local area and be a nomadic person. You could say like a relatively large cityscape. You could move from one spot to another within a period of months throughout the year. 1 month you're in this district, another month you're in this district, another month you're in this one. Or if you're in more rural areas, between smaller towns and villages, move between them. There's so many in European and North American cultural traditions who are so fond of private camping lot trips on these wilderness retreat resorts. So you enjoy it to some degree, or you're able to function in it to some degree. So do it all the time. For the winter, gather what gear you can to stay warm. Or if you're in a hotter climate, do what you can to keep cool. Lighter clothwear. Nudism. It really is so clear how so many people are miserable with societal settings they're placed in. But they so desperately, because of trauma bonds, want to stay in them. They feel the solution lies in changing the system. No, it lies in dismantling it. There are unnecessary manufactured double standards that are rooted in mass ideologies across the world right now that you cannot function in if you want liberty, if you want freedom for what you claim are your moral ideals. You can't, because those oppressive principles are inherently rooted in the functions of those systems. We live in a global corporatocracy. This world is ruled by ultra-capitalist corporations that lobby for governmental backing and are also the governmental systems. I'm so tired of so many, again, on the left, who really think voting is going to do something. No, it's not. The governments are ruled by these corporations. They are these corporations. So many legislative pieces across the world in republics, parliamentarian or more, I guess would be called standard in elected by a federalism in regards to it. Monarchies, theocracies, autocracies, more blatant authoritarianism governmentally. There is a legislator in place that is cleverly worded enough, one, to benefit these private companies across the world so that they can legally keep doing what they do, paying workers at low wages, and in the non-Western world, exploiting them beyond belief with very low payment, claiming that it's for the cause of the nation, that the private entities there reserve the right to do so, and then funneling resources back to the West for mass production and selling to the populaces. And the same goes for some amount of tactics, whatever amount of pandering tactics there are in those non-Western nations. And also creating legislature that allows for only individuals who are part of very much corporate elitism, the financial elites to some degree or another, to be able to run for political offices, to be able to become politicians who swear in the billings and legislature. It allows for only them if you're in that executive position of some kind or a influential economic position all across the world. These people, whether indoctrinated themselves into believing that this is the way society is and should be operating in a more for specifically capitalism and expanding into different demographic cultural practices, neoliberalism, or the idea just that you could not, I guess in a neoliberal sense, but being elected to so-called change and dismantle the system from within it. Well, that's a cognitive dissonance and a half. Whether they're manipulated into believing that the system can help change their already oppressive rhetoric, or from those who have the psychological disorders of sociopathy, egocentrism, are internally depressed, or narcissists, dominance, who are morally corrupt and are malicious and seek to gain mass financial and governmental power or religious power. Who know what they're doing in terms of manipulation, mass populist manipulation. Who live in the pseudo-segregated neighborhoods of cities, far away from the touristed areas, the advertised areas, who live in the far-off countrysides on large ranches that are secure as hell and no one is allowed to go on. The elites have their own world, people, that is not a part of the public eye. There are those of us who see glimpses of it, and I've actively tried to do so. But the reality is, they live in an ideological culture of domination. They don't live in a world of helping the suppressed groups, whether that be financial hierarchy, racial supremacy, sexuality supremacy, gender oppression, religious or, in an objectivist sense, non-religious domination. The freedom to express yourself. These elites, they live in a world of an ideology of suppression. They will pretend, put on a false persona to the public, that they are for their aid. They are not. They are not. It is a manipulation tactic. Yes, people, for those of you who are not good at psychoanalysis, you will not know when you're being manipulated. You won't. There's another stupid idea that clearly people have. Oh, yeah, psychology is important, but I know when I'm being manipulated. I could easily tell that. I'm not that stupid. Yeah, clearly you are. If you still believe all this. Most of you will not be able to tell. You have not actually begun measures to recognize patterns of different forms of psychological manipulation. I have. And there are other people who have. The elitist groups, the elitist factions, live on the principle of proving who can be more dominant over the suppressed demographics. They don't want to aid. Their entire cultural practice, almost every essence, ideologically, is for control. They see the lower groups as a game. They see us as a game. They'll put on their faces once they're around us, or for any advertisement manipulation propaganda that's about, that they want to aid us, or governmental social programs. They want to aid us. Healthcare, police. That the regulation is for the lower group's own benefit. In reality, in their far-off shadowy places, in the high penthouses, in the skyscrapers in the cities, or in the far-off ranches, when the doors are closed and their big gathering parties are made, it becomes a, yeah, you see my quarters last month? Oh yeah, we raked in so much profit. Mass profit from them. Hey, did you make that advertisement for, what was it, Pride Month? What? Yeah, okay, whatever. As long as it just keeps the consumers buying, whatever. Hey, did you, you're in the governmental system. Did you send our troops to, you send another deployment out to Kuwait? Yeah. There was apparently, yeah, there was some protests happening there, a lot of riots. A lot of people are getting angry. We gotta have more control over there. We gotta send more troops there. Yeah, and get the leader of Kuwait as well on the phone, please. Get their actual police force to start doing some shit. I'm not paying that insert racial slur here to lack on that. They live on an ideology of psychopathy, lack of empathy. They are malicious sociopaths. Now to state, so I don't want this to come off wrong, just because you are a sociopath does not mean that you will be a manipulative and morally corrupt person. It just solely means you lack empathy. You at the moment do not comprehend and can't orient yourself around projecting empathic personality characteristics. As of trauma, or to some degree, because of previous prenatal factors, congenital sociopathy. Won't inherently be a horrible person as far as I'm concerned because you lack empathy. But sadly, it makes you very susceptible to it. I was in Ottawa. In one of my videos, I said something very ignorant, which was ableist to me. I was exploring Ottawa Part 8 when I actually sat in on, here in Canada, one of the court hearings for Freedom Convoy that happened in Ottawa. When I sat in on Daniel Bulford's court hearing, one of them at least. When I was out by the Parliament, I heard some people laughing at a person who clearly had manic schizophrenia. Well, not physically violent elements, it seemed, in that moment, but was very vocally distraught, screaming at the top of their lungs. So that, in that regard, maybe elements of schizoaffective disorder. And I said sociopathic fucks under my breath about those people who were laughing. Because that is sociopathic. That is demeaning. That is dehumanizing. But I shouldn't have targeted the sociopathy as just, well, the root of my anger. I should have just said moronic fucks or something like that. Along with this, I've finally noticed that I've gotten better and I've been able recently to better control how I express my aggression. Something that I've been trying to do for a long while now, again since Ottawa, more effectively, I feel. And no, don't get me wrong, not letting go of anger. That is completely unhealthy. Anyone who's of the mindset of letting go of anger, well, I think you're speaking from a very privileged position. Very, very privileged. Or in that regard, again, you've just given up. And you're emotionally devoid beyond all help. Anger, expressing things that disrupt your five subconscious desires, is healthy. It is a natural apathetic response when something has disturbed you so greatly. It is in essence justifiable. But here's another reality. Why I advocate empathy and sympathy to those who oppress, for those who oppress, from those who are suppressed. You cannot do anger provably without empathy or sympathy. Ethically, you can't. Because these problems are so extensive. It doesn't matter how much information is available online. There are people who don't have access, from the most impoverished to the highest elites, who don't have access to the internet, at least to this beneficial information. Because so much more ignorance is so widespread. You cannot blame someone for being in that environment, being born into it. You can blame them for their choices, as far as I'm concerned, after what has happened, because it's provably unethical. But really look at that. How can you justify having anger towards someone and not having any compassion towards them? When they were raised in an environment that was a breeding ground for sociopathic tendencies, for egotistical personality disorder, for severe internalized depression. How can you blame them for that? How can you justify that? How can you justify having lack of care for a man who is an abuser, who is encroachingly domineering, who is misogynistic beyond all hell, who was raised in a patriarchal environment? What did you expect them to turn out to be? And who was raised in an environment where critical thought was dissuaded? How could you blame an aggressively racist, rural white American farmer for having mass ignorance towards other ethnic groups, for thinking that cultural elements of theirs all around are destructive to their own, and going towards elements of what you could consider neo-Nazism? If they were surrounded by that, how could you blame them for turning out like that? What did you expect to happen? And yes, in essence, the five subconscious desires, is that not, in a contradicting sense, what we expect out of life? Yes. But consciously, I don't think people should expect anything. It's another thing I've had to deal with. I have had to try for a long time to not consciously expect anything from people. Not in a sense of mistrusting people. In the sense of, look, I don't know what they know. So I'm not going to expect them to be as smart as I think they can be. I'm not going to expect that. Because on my basis, I'm clearly on another level of intelligence than many people. I know why it's so frustrating. Here's the thing. Again, I said I have accepted all these facts. But in regards to my work not being recognized by people or regarded as anything serious, I shouldn't have to accept that. And I'm not the only one with these feelings. It's very clear. I'm not the only one. There are people like me in the far-off corners of the internet and the far-off corners of the physical world who have the same thought process as me. I've only found them to some degree in my interpersonal life, and I may never find them in any great extent in any of my travels. I might never find a plethora of very much like-minded people. I realize that. And I'm not just going to, even if I was to find people who were with my travels, me getting to Iqaluit, Nunavut, Canada, and then going international to 50 different specific countries. I'm not just going to stay with people for just solely secure comfortability. I'm not. I would love if people would come along with me on this journey of mine. People who want to be nomads as well and vagabonds. Again, back to my point about people leaving their homes in mass, quitting their jobs in mass, which would cause these economies, these economic systems, governmental systems, sociocultural systems, if you don't abide by a set cultural practice anymore, to collapse. They would collapse overnight. And go with other people. Don't go by yourself. Work communitarianly. In groups. Travel in bands of digital nomads. There are already people who have realized these same things as me and have committed to that life. But it's a small extent. I know why it's so frustrating in this regards. That people don't realize this, that people don't listen to people like me. That in mass, it's not popular. I know for us how frustrating it is. You know why? Because I've seen that it can be popular. It's not that it can't get into the larger populaces. The idea, loved or hated, the idea still can get there. I mean it. Here's the most basic example I can prove that by. Online memes. There are people who have been in a 5-second clip on Vine. Remember when Vine was a mass thing? On Instagram. On fucking whatever else. Who have done something stupid in the video. Something comedically devoid. Oh, some random quirky dance or something of the sort. And it spreads like wildfire across the internet. And then it makes its way onto corporate late-night television shows and fucking pop cultural references, whatever else. It spreads like blazing fire. And everyone knows who that person is, at the very least what they did. Even to the extent of problematic celebritization. Whether they wanted that or not. Yet, here I am, literally having discovered the essence of human nature itself. As far as I'm concerned. My scientific proposal videos as of this point right now that I'm recording this, barely even scratched 50 views. Barely even scratched it. They've been up for 7 months now. 8 months. Those memes blow up 2 days, 3 days. Millions of people invested in looking at the funny cultural phenomenon. But this literally made a process of how suicide works. Aligning of culture and ideology. A thought experiment for how our moral choices affect other people and our surroundings. And an innate structure, philopsychologically, of how human morality actually forms and how it will inevitably form, whether those morals are beneficial or detrimental. But nope. No one's interested. At least online here, no one's interested. For the most part. Because it's not just about views. It's not just about if someone takes a look at something. Good, you clicked on the video. Good, you scrolled through my online post of my actual theories. Did you read them? Did you listen to the video? Or did you just click on it? Did you just quickly scroll past what I was saying? Briefly read it? Or did you read it and try and understand it? Did you leave a comment to try and engage in a dialogue? Share your thoughts? No? Doesn't matter if you subscribed. It doesn't matter. What good does that do when you don't actually engage with the person? If you actually learned something from what I've said, why wouldn't you tell me? I've been making an effort for people that I see now online to actively try, if I've learned something from their content, to leave a comment and tell them how much I appreciated it and share my thoughts. Obviously, I can't get to everyone, but there are people I can. So that's what's frustrating, I feel, to anyone in my position. It's because we know that the intelligent stuff can be seen and heard by a great many. It's just the stupid, idiotic bullshit. It's more palatable than this. And I also further realized why. For the longest time, I've really hated the way I speak, I communicate. One, that's because of intellectual ageism I faced. But two, it's because of the inherent contradictions in life. The paradox of existence. That life is every conceptualized thing in life. Every object, every idea. As far as I'm concerned, there is a fundamental contradiction in the way we articulate ourselves, in the way we communicate and conceptualize that knowledge. There's a fundamental contradiction somewhere in each of those things. I don't know them all. I can't point at this door behind me and find the fundamental contradiction in it right now. I can't point at the wall right now and find the fundamental contradiction in the fact of referring to it as a wall, as a blockade between another room. I can't currently, but I know it's there. Someone else can. Someone else just as smart as me or far smarter than me. And in that regard, because of my new theory of the ontological inherence of intersectionality. The world is fundamentally interconnected. You cannot speak about one issue without bringing in another, having it affect another. You can't. Despite what those on the far left may think. You can't. It's impossible. It will inherently have an effect of the orientation of that other issue. You cannot, for so long, I always thought whenever I would speak about things, I was missing something. I was never satisfied. No, I could have said this. I could have gone further into detail about this. I could have said more about it to make you understand. But that's interactive loneliness. You can understand other people's perceptions, but it'll never be to a 100% degree of understanding. You will never understand someone else's perspective to the exact envision cognitively that they have of it. It can be, to a greatest extent, possible. Uttermost fulfillment. But it won't be concretely 100% satisfying. And that's what drives pro-social human interaction. That innate loneliness. Loneliness projection. That's why we even go towards other people. That's where empathy and sympathy comes from, emotionally, as far as I'm concerned. It's the only reason. For all of you who claim you need to learn to be comfortable being alone and by yourself, stop talking to your YouTube camera then. Stop it. Stop telling people in your interpersonal life this at a constant rate. Stop engaging in conversation with them. You're hypocrites. Stop pretending as if you can't have some amount of enjoyment with other people. Highly antisocial. Yes, you can. Clearly you enjoy speaking about how you so-called can't have enjoyment with other people. You clearly like talking about it to whatever amount of an audience you have. I always felt like I was missing something in my speech. I never said enough. There was more I could have said. But I realize now that I can't be the one to say it all. That there are things that during a said piece of conversation I will miss. That's innate. One example I could bring up about this in relation to contradictions, just quickly. This is in regards to something that's often said that I agree with on a surface level in terms of leftist ideology, is that people are not monoliths. Different demographics. They aren't one concretely the same conglomerate. They aren't distinctly wholly alike, even if they share similar elements within their demographic. They're not a monolith. They're not a generalized entity. Is that not a generalized statement? We are not a monolith? Is that not to proclaim that a large group of people, generally speaking, is not the same, not concretely alike, and they have individual elements to them? Is that not a generalized statement? On a surface level, no. On an in-depth level, yeah. But I think this video is getting too lengthy now. But I will state. So, as I said before in Montreal, in a video where I talked about things similar, somewhat, just without having realized more of this epiphany. In regards to this specifically, though, I'm in this for the long haul. And if I die trying, then I die trying. I already knew this for a long while, just in terms of me traveling from one place to another, but in terms of refusing to abide by things, I'll refuse until I'm kicked out of every so-called safe haven. Until it kills me. I'm not suicidal in the slightest. On that notion, suicide, well, what's the point of it? What's the point? I'll let the world kill me. I'll do what I feel is necessary, and I'll let out there murder me for it. Doesn't mean I'm just going to do whatever I want, no. But if I abide by provably morally righteous actions, and I die for it, well, then I die for it. What's the point of suicide? I will do as I see fit. If I get murdered for it, I get murdered for it. At least I died free. Freer than most of you. Realistically, any of you watching this. And I don't want to die, just like everyone else does not want to die. Subconsciously afraid of death. And you know how I can prove that? Oh, for all you smug atheists who think, oh, death comes to us all, you shouldn't fear death, it hinders you, it hinders progress, fear of death, yada, 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 it's latch onto emotional trauma. Really? Then why aren't you out here like me, taking a risk surviving against the elements? Why are you still walking to your job? Why are you still complying with the law? Why are you still appeasing the perceptions of your little friend group who don't really understand you, just for the sake of not feeling consciously alone? Because you are afraid of death. For all of you as well, in regards to right-wing nonsense who want to join up for the military, die for your country, so-called, on the guise of altruistic suicide. Who think that the left should just stop complaining and suck it up. The oppression. Again, why aren't you out here like me? You so-called think the world is run by radical leftists by now, which the same thing has been said throughout history time and time again by the right wing. Yeah, then why aren't you out here like me? If you're so glorious, so self-righteous to want to die for your country. Or in regards to far leftism, if you're so willing to take up arms in an uprising if it were to happen, one, why don't you start it? Why don't you go grab a gun and start rushing into the palaces and mansions of the corporate CEOs? Why don't you start doing that instead of picketing with signs for 3 days, or doing a walkout and sitting out blocking traffic for a few hours until you're dragged away by police, and then you're like, okay, fine, we'll go back to work. If you both are so eager to jump into battle, die for your cause, in bloody uprising and vengeance, why aren't you out here fighting the elements like me? You take just as much a risk of death. No, because you view it as some big, glorious display of your absolutism towards your cause. Well, it's not. So if you want to prove me wrong, to some degree, which you won't, because even then, even if you're outside, you're still going to be trying to forge for survival. You still don't want to die. Well, if any of you really believe that you don't fear death, you would have no problem risking life and death, being out in the cold and hot elements in a homeless life. You wouldn't. And don't convince yourself for even a second it's anything other. You wouldn't be cowering away in your apartments and homes. Oh, and another slam at the right wing. For those of you who say that the left complains too much, stop complaining. We've all been through misery, suck it up. Really, then you stop complaining. If you have the mentality of well, you made your bed, now sleep in it, a horrible mentality, then stop talking. You pissed off the left, now sleep in that bed of consequences. Right wing, you pissed us off. You don't agree with our ideologies. Well, now suffer the consequences for that, of us being angry at you. This idea that the logic of do unto others what you would like done unto yourself doesn't work, because some people actually want destructive things done to them. No, they don't. If they did, then it's inherently not destructive. Now, how I can prove that? Because, well, if you were complaining about something and you want it done to you, why are you complaining? Why are you complaining? You wouldn't be complaining if you wanted it done to you. It's a trauma response. And I'll elaborate on all of this in other videos. But well, that's what's happening. Oh, and when wintertime comes here further, if I'm out on the streets, I'll bloody well buy a Molotov. Well, I'll make a Molotov cocktail. If I have to, I'll buy alcohol, I'll buy a rag, I'll light it on fire. I'll find a bit of concrete and I'll crack some ice. And I'll light a fire right on the ice to somewhat stay warm if I can't get inside. And if the police want to come by and say, you have to put that out, no. You do it, officers. You do it. They want to arrest me for that? Okay. Take me to the squad car. I'll go ragdoll. Every time. No matter what it may be. If I get involved with the police, I'll go ragdoll. I'll tell them, take me away. Go ahead. Drag me to the car. I won't resist. But you can have fun dragging my limp body. I'm not going to sit up in the squad car. And if they want me to, once they take me to the precinct, get inside, nope, you can drag me. Drag me in. Go right ahead. Chop, chop, officers. Lift with those legs. Go ahead. Drag me in there. And I won't move. And if I was charged and I was given a court hearing, I won't go to it. I won't. Send a bounty hunter after me. Drag me in. Drag me away. Let's go again. I'll go limp. Use your legs. Use your arms. Drag me in. And then once I get there, I will try to walk right back out. And if they tackle me to the ground, good. Once they release me, get right back up and try walking out again. They can punch me again. They can punch me again to the ground. You can keep punching me all you want. The only way that I will stay seated in a prison or in a courtroom or anywhere that I don't want to be from here on out is if you restrain me or you shoot me. You either let me go, you restrain me, and take me to wherever you want me to be encaged, or you shoot me and kill me. Those are the only ways. So I'm in this for the long haul, for the rest of my life. I will not abide by moral corruption more than I have to or see that I have to. And I will make mistakes. There will be things that I didn't assess well. Things that I was more complacent to than I should have been. Going from here on out, flawed like everyone else. But I will die trying to be a morally competent person. I will die trying to benefit myself and other people. And I will die a free person. When are you going to start?